Hi, everyone. We're here on User's Guide to the Soul and just getting ready to go live on Facebook. So give me 1 minute. We're in chapter 37 and we're going live on Facebook. So welcome to Facebook. Welcome to User's Guide to the Soul to everyone on Facebook. And if you're in the class, why don't you go ahead and mute unless you're the first one reading, which is Rick. You might notice we have a new location here. We're at Temple Israel, so we're taking advantage of the better camera and the better microphone, and also being right here in the chapel is a beautiful way to be learning. I love Temple, and hope one day we'll be able to have our classes here in person once again, right? But you can also always join on Zoom or on video in the future. We'll make sure that keeps going. So we are in chapter 37 of the Tanya. We're really in the three chapters that are the key concept of this whole approach of Kabbalah and Hasidus and also meditation. If we go back 2 years, we've learned two systems of meditation, the short long path and the long short path. And we'll take time at the end today to do a short meditation and revisit that practice, which I hope many people are doing on your own. But these chapters are looking at the whole philosophy of why we should pursue these systems of meditation, these systems of personal growth. Because we've learned that for some people, there's only a certain level they can get to in terms of transforming their inner world, the emotions of their souls, their two souls. And it might be that a person who's learned these two systems of meditation and is practicing them will have questions. Well, if I can't become a tzaddik, a perfectly righteous individual, then why? What's the point? And the Alter Rebbe is laying out a real entire philosophy of life that can inspire us to continue with our practice and grow and elevate through a whole life, even if we can't become a tzaddik, because most of us actually cannot, as we've learned. So the first chapter, we learned about the power of a mitzvah, and we learned about that image of an oil and a lamp, which is so beautiful on Hanukkah, that the oil in our lamp represents the physical mitzvahs that we do, which feed the wick, which is our body, which cause the light of the Shekhinah, God's presence, to dwell over our head. So as we approach Hanukkah, that's a beautiful image to have in mind as a meditation as well, that we want to have plenty of beautiful oil in terms of physical mitzvahs to make sure the light of the Shekhinah is dwelling over our heads. And the reason a mitzvah can is because it's completely surrendered to God, completely transparent. So when I do a mitzvah, if I'm relying on me and my wanting to connect to God, there's always a me that's in the way. And so I can't necessarily connect fully with God. With a mitzvah, there's just the Chanukiah. There's not an ego in the way, so it's completely surrendered. And that functions as a channel for us. And that's why our soul can't be the oil. It's a mitzvah that has to be the oil that feeds my physical body, the wick. Chapter 36, we learned about this concept of a dira b'tachtonim, a home for God in the lowest realms. And that is the point of doing a mitzvah, is that we want to elevate something in the world by actually creating a home for God. And we do that by doing a mitzvah. And then the physical objects of that mitzvah become elevated, and we elevate our share of the world. And then finally, in chapter 37, we learned about the mechanics of how that works and how, in fact, it's not just the Chanukiah and the oil, but it's also the money that I earned to buy the Chanukiah. It's also the energy from the food that I ate to walk and get the Chanukiah. It's all the objects and all the materials that I encounter, whether I eat or drink or use them in my life, that are elevated along with that one mitzvah. And that's how we can each elevate our share of the world, because there's 600,000 composite Jewish souls that make up all of the Jewish people. Each one of them, oh, sorry, lost someone. Let me admit her. Each one of them is responsible for elevating 1/600,000th of the world. And we finally looked at this idea of why it is that we shouldn't be upset if we can't be at tzaddik, And if we're just serving God like we've learned as a Beinoni with the long short path and the short long path, which we can review, it's because that is actually the purpose of why the world was created. As the Alter Rebbe says, that's the big why. A tzaddik will have tremendous love for God, tremendous awe for God automatically. They're a very spiritual person, and I can't get to that level of spirituality. However, why does the tzaddik come here? Not to experience that love and that awe, because they experience far less than they would as a soul in heaven. So if the point was to love and fear God, they'd stay in heaven. There's much more love and awe available to even a tzaddik than when they're down here in a body. Why did a tzaddik come here? To elevate the world by doing mitzvahs. Very simple, just like you and me. So if I feel like, well, this is Judaism 101, and hi, Sharon, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm glad you got back on. Welcome. If I feel like this is Judaism 101, why can't I have a tzaddik's Judaism? The Alter Rebbe just said, a tzaddik did not come here to experience their tremendous level of love and awe. They came here to put a coin in a tzedakah box, just like you do. And once it's in the box, it's just a coin. So you can achieve everything the tzaddik achieves, and the tzaddik is doing exactly the same thing you are, and that is the core of Judaism. We believe Ma'aseh Hu'ikar, action is the core, the key. So that it's a lot. If you've not been with us, don't be shocked if you didn't follow all of that. But we're going to go inside the text now. Let me make sure anyone on Facebook, if you have any questions, please add them to the comments. I'm watching, so you can be part of the class, and I'll bring your questions in. Let's continue, top of 516. Aval bitzdaka she'adam noten megia kapav. Rick?
In the case of charity, however, which one gives from the proceeds of the toil of his hands.
So now we're learning about, of all the mitzvahs, if the point of a mitzvah is to elevate the physical world, while the physical world still stays physical. So it's not vanishing and going to heaven and losing its physical component. It's still a physical object. It's still going to be a physical world. But if the point of a mitzvah is to make a home for God and elevate the spiritual spark of that component of reality, nothing does that to the same extent as tzedakah. Nothing does that even comes close to the same extent as tzedakah. And why? Because with another mitzvah, as we said, I'm using maybe my hand or my eye or my legs, right? If I'm walking on Shabbat, I'm walking with my feet. I guess my whole body, but my feet are doing the walking. If I'm waving a lulav and etrog, I'm using my hand. But with tzedakah, how did I earn that money? With all of my effort, with all of my toil. So when you look at the funds that you're giving to tzedakah, you're not talking about just one part of your body. You're talking about your whole being, your whole essence. You've sunk it into hustling and getting up in the morning and getting to work and talking and walking and writing and thinking. Your brain's working. So tzedakah represents all of our physical sphere more than any other mitzvah can. And so when you give tzedakah, you're elevating the entire kit and caboodle. You're not just elevating one piece. So it stands alone, and we say is equal to the other mitzvahs, including Torah study, amazingly, because in terms of creating a home for God, it elevates everything at once. Yeah. Maxine, you had a question?
Yeah. Could tzedakah be other means of mitzvot, like helping someone out or volunteering or whatever, other than just giving cash?
Absolutely. Tzedakah includes any donation that you make. So if you make a donation in kind, good question. If you give your services to someone, say you're a doctor and you see patients for free as part of your practice, that's tzedakah. If you take some of your time and give it to an organization, that's also tzedakah. Any kind of donations, whether you made it now or it's testamentary or whatever it is, everything that counts as tzedakah is wrapped up in that. So very good question. Any other thoughts or comments on that? And we should really, this is something we can really take to heart, because every one of us gives tzedakah in one way or another. And we really should revisit the word tzedakah and what it means, because it is one of the most poorly translated words in all of Judaism. I think most people, if you said, what's tzedakah in English, we'd say the C word, right? Charity. Charity. And charity implies I'm a nice person, I'm being charitable. I'm seeing a problem, and because I'm charitable, I'm giving of myself, which I didn't need to, and I'm a nice person, I'm doing extra, right? That's charity. Tzedakah is exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. You can't translate tzedakah as charity, because for Judaism, it's a commandment to give 10% of your wealth, of your income every year to charity, not your total wealth, but your income that year, and your net income, not your gross income, okay? That 10% and up to 20% is fine also, but that 10%, it's not yours. It's not that you're giving it because you're a nice person or giving it because you see a need. It's actually, it belonged to tzedakah the moment you earned it. In Judaism, we say the amount of money you're going to earn this year is determined on Rosh Hashanah. Kabbalistically, they say it's already determined. And included in that is 10% that is tzedakah. It was never yours. It's just yours to delegate where it goes. So tzedakah just means righteousness. It just means doing what's necessary, and has nothing to do with, am I a nice person? Now, it can make me a nice person, because when I'm giving tzedakah, it hurts a little, and it changes my character. But the fact that I give tzedakah does not mean that I'm being charitable. In Judaism, it's actually, it's a requirement, and it's the piece that lets me elevate my share of the world, and as a soul, progress. Okay, let's go a little faster. Hare kol koach nafsho hachiyunit milubash basiyat malachto o esek acher shenistaker bo ma'ut elu. Norrine?
Surely all the strength of his vital soul is clothed in that, for example, applied to the effort of his labor or in any other occupation by which he earned this money, which he now distributes for charity.
I'm realizing I think I just put this on Facebook as a private view. So sorry to the Facebook people. I'm not going to start over again, but I'll make it public afterwards. So if you're watching on Facebook, that's why it was after the fact. All right. So all the strength of my vital soul is clothed in this labor. We're talking about elevating my animal soul as well. And so what is it that elevates my animal soul? More than anything, it's taking that energy, putting it into earning money, and then giving that money away. And if you've ever written a check to charity that kind of it's a little more than you want, right? And you feel it, that's your animal soul being transformed. That feeling, yeah? Yes, Rick?
That's the first time I've heard about you mentioning that we're obligated to give 10%, and that's written down. That's part of, where is that part of the Talmud? Is it a Mishnah? What is that?
You can find it in the Rambam's Mishneh Torah, and it's actually a beautiful piece. Tzedakah itself, the word, spells out. Let me see if I can do this. Tzedakah itself, the word, spells out the percentage you have to give, because tzadi is 90 and kuf is 100. So the tzadi and the kuf tell you that you have to give 1/10. That's the ratio. You have to give 1/10 of your income normally, and then the dal and the hay, that's 4 and 5, so that's 4/5. That's 20%. So the word itself actually explains to you that the minimum you have to give is 10%. Like the tzadi and the kuf is a ratio of 9/10, and then that 10% is what you give, and the dal and the hay, that's 4/5, and that 20% is what you have to give is the maximum. But you'll find it. It's not written in the Torah. You must give 10%, but the oral tradition spells out, like many of the commandments in the Torah, spells out the details. So, and I'm sure it's in the Gemara too. I can't quote where. Yeah, it's news to other people.
I think it's in the Torah also.
It's in the Torah.
I think
From
so.
one of the tithing conversations.
Abraham gives Melchizedek a fifth, and there's different.
Yeah, I'm sure it comes from sources. I don't remember what Rashi says or.
I don't know exactly where, but I've seen it there.
Yeah. So definitely, this is. I know in Reform Judaism we're not halakhically bound, So, you won't see temples saying, have you given your 10% this year? You must. But that is definitely the tradition, is 10% is the minimum for any Jewish person. So think about that, right? 10% you feel, right? Thus,
Thus, when he gives charity, this money to which he applied all of the strength of his vital soul, his entire vital soul ascends to God. Hence, the superiority of charity over other mitzvot.
Right, so we're not affecting just the piece of my animal soul that powers my hand, or the piece of the animal soul that powers my feet. I'm now causing all the vitality of my animal soul to be elevated. Because remember, we said the energy of your animal soul that goes into a mitzvah is actually fully united with the Ein Sof. Fully united. It's amazing to think about it. Even though I'm a separate being and God's infinite, the Ein Sof is infinite, there's a way that the energy of my physical drive can become completely one with Ein Sof, even if I can't see it with my physical eyes. And this is it. So tzedakah doesn't take just one component, the component of your physical being and your animal soul that is doing the mitzvah. It takes the whole thing and elevates it. And now, so what about people who don't earn money? What about people who perhaps they got a big inheritance, or they're still young and live in their family and are taken care of? How do they participate in this? וגם מי שאינו נהנה מגיעו מכל מקום הואיל ובמעות אלו היה יכול לקנות חיי נפשו, הרי נותן חיי נפשו לשם. Where are we at? Doreen? I think Doreen, if you'll unmute, we'll be able to hear you. Oh, I think you're still muted, Doreen. There you go. Good.
Even he who does not earn his livelihood from his labors, nevertheless, since he could have purchased with this money that he gave for charity sustenance for the life of his vital soul, he is actually giving his soul's life to God in the form of charity. Thus, charity comprises and therefore elevates more energy of the vital soul than any other mitzvah.
So this is an even more novel idea. We've already said that when I give charity, because I'm working to earn my money, all that energy gets elevated. And now the Alter Rebbe says, well, what about people who just have wealth and don't have to necessarily work? And he says, well, that wealth, that was your potential for life. You're buying all your food, you're buying your shelter, you're buying your protection, whatever it is, you're buying medical help if you need it, God forbid. So that wealth represents your potential life. And when you're giving it away, that also elevates your life, even though you may not have this year gone and spent energy and calories and time working. Just it being your potential life can also have that effect of elevating your vital soul and its energy to unite to God.
Cantor, I also think that amount of money is what they gave to the Levites when they were talking about supporting the Mishkan in Leviticus.
Yes, you're right. I've seen, I don't remember the individual, I've seen where it says, and this is where we get this from, right, and this is where we get this law from. Yeah. And definitely, like what was the one that we did just this weekend? I was so, something with, there was I'm losing it. Something in Rashi where it says, this is where we get the law of this from. And it was a strange scenario. But for sure, you're right that there's different biblical commandments that we pull it from. Very good.
This is why our sages have said that charity hastens the messianic redemption.
And here we get back to the beginning of the chapter, that this era we discussed, where each of us has focused and elevated our share of the world until the world attains what Reformed Judaism calls the Messianic era. And what Kabbalah says is still a physical world, but where oneness is the main obvious component. So I wake up and I see just the oneness of the Ein Sof. I don't see me and you and all these separations. And tzedakah is the thing that brings that the quickest, that does the most to bring that time. As we said, the last master of this tradition, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the last Rebbe of this tradition, focused in on that like a laser and made that really the drive of so much that he did. And that when he met people maybe once in their lifetime for just 3 seconds, and they came by to say hello, when he was late in life, he would stand for hours and he'd give everyone $1 to give to charity so that they could do an act of charity together. And he, as I said, encouraged people to have a tzedakah box in every home and even affix it to your house so it's part of who you are. This is really, and I think that transformed a lot of the wider world because that energy really spread over the last decades. לפי שבצדקה אחת מעלה הרבה מנפש החיונית, מה שלא היה יכול להעלות ממנה כל כך כוחות ובחינות בכמה מצוות מעשיות אחרות.
For with one act of charity, one elevates a great deal of the vital soul, more of its faculties and power, in fact, than he might elevate through many other activity mitzvot combined. As mentioned earlier in this chapter, the Messianic era is a result of our efforts in purifying and elevating the vital soul. Charity, which affects this elevation, is such great measure, thus hastens the redemption.
Makes sense? So this is the end of this discussion about tzedakah, and we should know, and we should have that lens on that whether you're donating to a funded temple or whether you're donating your time or whether you're serving someone at no charge, whatever it is, if you're aware that that is the most powerful way to make a home for God, and you're aware you're elevating all the physical aspects of the world that are connected to that act of charity, and you're aware that your own vital soul, its energy is being elevated, it becomes such a rich experience. It becomes such a transformational experience. I remember, this just occurred to me, I was at Jerusalem, I don't know how many years ago this was, not one of our earlier missions. And I like to sneak off at 5 a.m. and go to the Kotel to daven with a beautiful minyan in the mornings in Jerusalem before the busy day with the bus starts. And I was there one morning, and if you've been to Jerusalem, there's all these really plugged in cats there. I'm sure you've seen it. You don't know who's who, but you're sure you're surrounded. There's a few tzaddikim there, and really dedicated people. And people come around and they collect charity because part of the practice is you give charity before you pray because it helps your prayers in different ways. So someone was coming around, and I had my pocket of shekels that I would give. I had a little budget. I give one to each person because you try not to distract your prayers. So you want to have it prepared. And I pulled out a coin or maybe a bill, I forget, to give to someone. And one of the more elder people that was kind of helping lead, he grabbed my hand before I gave it, and he, this is pre-COVID, right? He kissed the coin, and he looked at me and he said, "If only you knew how much God loves tzedakah." He said it in Hebrew, so I'm pretty sure that's what he said. But the look in his eyes, you couldn't mistake. There was a glow there, right? And it just speaks to that one act of tzedakah. It can be okay. This is what I'm going to do. I owe it and I give it. It can be, I'm Jewish, so I do this. It can be meaningful. But this man, he looked at what was happening, and he wanted me to understand that I was changing the world, that I was elevating everything. And he couldn't express it enough. And somehow he thought I needed to hear that, which probably I did, right? So this really, it can create a very rich, multi-dimensional experience. And also when we're meditating, we want to take the acts of charity that we've done, and we want to attach, as we learned, our emotions that we generate during meditation to elevate that aspect of the world even further, because we've learned about the different spiritual worlds. And our meditative practice will help that flight upwards, so to speak. So we a new section we're going in 37. Any last questions about tzedakah? Good. If you're watching in the future on Facebook, feel free to email me if you have a question. Love to continue the conversations. Now this last section of 37. still a bit of a large section, is, but what about Torah study? What about Torah study? You know, as we know, in a Hasidic text, in a Kabbalistic text of this style, you can't go on for that long about how tzedakah is, you know, worth everything else combined, and how a mitzvah is really the whole point of existence, without now going back and saying, but hold on, isn't Torah study also the same as all the other mitzvahs combined? So what about that? And we're going to look at the different elements that make tzedakah the same as all the other mitzvahs combined, including Torah study. And at the same time, Torah outweighs all the other mitzvahs combined, including tzedakah. Even though that's mathematically impossible, it's kabbalistically possible, right? Because math and Kabbalah don't always go together.
As for the statement of our rabbis that Torah study outweighs all other mitzvot, including charity, how can this be reconciled with what was said above?
And so first, we're going to look at this question in terms of the conversation we just had. So in terms of the conversation we just had, which is about creating a home for God in the physical world, and so elevating everything around us to bring us to the final chapter of reality, which is this Reformed Messianic era that we describe. In terms of that, which is why I'm created, why I'm here, and why I have a house and an income and objects in my life, that's why they're here. In terms of that, what does Torah accomplish? We did say learning Torah is actually a proto-physical act, because we're all moving our mouths when we read. We're all taking part in that. And when I move my mouth, that creates physical vibrations. And it takes energy from my animal soul that's being elevated. So there is a little bit of physical activity involved in Torah study, and that does elevate something of the world and something of my animal soul, but it's a minor thing. It's just moving your mouth. That's not such a physical thing. I can ride a bike for maybe an hour. I can run for maybe 5 minutes, and I can speak, right? As long as someone will let me. So in terms of how it elevates the world, it really is a minor piece, right? Did we just read the bottom of 517? I lost my place. Someone help me out.
One more paragraph down there.
Great. So here he makes that point. Hayinu mipnei shetalmud Torah hi b'dibur machshava shehem levushim hapnimim shel nefesh hachiyunit.
This is because the study of Torah employs speech and thought, which are the inner garments of the vital soul, unlike action, which is external. Thus, only Torah study and not other mitzvot can suffuse the inner garments of the soul with the light of Torah.
Right, so speech and thought, of the three garments of the soul we learned about, thought, speech, and action, they're the inner garments. So yes, it suffuses the inner garments of my soul, but it's not interacting with the world in the same way as action. So if I want to elevate the world, giving $1 to charity, to tzedakah rather, that has a global impact. But learning Torah and moving my mouth and elevating my inner garments of speech and thought, that doesn't really compare. That's a little sorry, Joyce. Let's mute that. Thanks. Sorry, I actually, he's making a different point. So let me backtrack here. Here he's saying the reason Torah study can be considered superior to mitzvot in terms of this conversation is because when I do an action, and this is the opposite of what I said. I just turned the page and realized I was doing the global point and not the specific point. So you can say that Torah study outweighs mitzvot because when I give $1 to charity, it's my hand and my physical body is in action. But when I learn Torah, it's thought and speech, which are the inner garments of my soul. So in there's a certain kind of advantage in that those parts of my animal soul that are being elevated are the inner garments. They're closer. They're higher on the chart of who I am. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
but it still is, in terms of elevating the animal soul, it's not as powerful. And then a second point, and the first 3 times I went through the Tanya, because you learn the Tanya once a year if you're following this style of meditation and personal growth. And the first 3 times I learned it, I got to this chapter, and I just went, are you kidding me? Is it possible? Because we just spent 36 chapters learning that a Bainani, a normal person, cannot transform the identity of their animal soul to be like a tzaddik. That as try as I might, my emotions, I'm still going to like brownies and movies, etc., more than I'm going to like helping another person in the middle of the night because they need help, or sitting and learning another 10 minutes of Torah. I'm still going to be self-centered by nature. I'll have to just use my mind to control my heart. But then you get to this next paragraph, and the Alter Rebbe says something which is quite amazing, but you shouldn't think that it's easy to do. It's something that takes still many, many years of work. וגם מהותן ועצמותן של בחינות חוכמה בינה דת מקליפת נוגה שבנפש החיונית נכללות בקדושה ממש כשעוסק בתורה בעיון ושכל.
Furthermore,
yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Did Sharon want to read? I'm sorry.
Sharon, did you find the text, or you want?
Okay. Never mind.
You're good.
Furthermore,
Okay,
the very substance and essence of the intellectual faculties of Chabad, Chokhmah, Bina, and Dad, of the Klipat Noga, in the vital soul, are actually absorbed into holiness when one studies Torah with concentration and intelligence.
So this gets back to chapter 23 about how Torah study gets inside you. And listen to what he's saying. The vital soul, the midot, the emotions of the vital soul, cannot be transformed such that they become like a second divine soul. You can't do it. You just have to control them, and slowly over time you can elevate them a little more and more so my insides match my outsides. But if you're not a tzaddik, you're never going to fully do that. You're always going to be struggling to have the emotional components of your animal soul match your perspective of your divine soul. But with Chabad, with Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat, with the intellectual components of the soul that we've learned about in the early chapters, there, and this is the first time we're being told in the Tanya, there a Bainani can actually transform not just their thought, but the intellectual identity of their soul, Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat, the intellectual component of their soul. If you learn a tremendous amount of Torah and really drill it in, you can actually transform the intellect of your animal soul to become like a second divine soul. That is actually in everybody's power. But you should know that it really, really takes a lot of application. You're talking about somebody that spent years and years learning Torah for a lot of the day and drilling it in and memorizing it so that that becomes truly the lens through which you see the world. So you can change your perspective. And the reason has to do with the whole kabbalistic aspect of, if you've heard of the shattering of the vessels in the world of Tohu, I won't go into it. But before this world of Tikkun was created, there was a previous world of Tohu where all the Sfirot didn't interrelate and they couldn't handle the energy and they broke. And that shattering the vessels happened mainly not in the Chabad of the Ein Sof, but in the Midot of the Ein Sof. So that's why here, our Midot are much more difficult to elevate. But because that shattering of the vessels didn't happen in the Chabad of the Ein Sof, our Chabad, you actually can transform and elevate it. If you didn't understand that, that's fine. That's Tanya 301. But if you're into that, you can look that up and see that's the Kabbalistic reason why a Bainani can actually transform their Chabad. So their Chabad is like a tzaddik, and they have the Chabad of a tzaddik. But it's not just from 20 minutes a day of learning. So that's another reason why Torah study might be able to say it's worth the other mitzvahs combined, because through Torah study, you can transform your Chabad, so your Chabad is like a tzaddik. And he continues how that would happen. V'af shemahutan v'atzmutan shel hamidot chesed gvura tiferet chulu lo yachlu lahem habeinanim lahapcham likdusha.
Although Beinonim are incapable of mastering the substance and essence of the Midot, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, and so on, so as to transform them into holiness.
So here he goes through, I've told you, if you're a Beinoni, and that's everybody except, potentially everybody except just very, very few individuals called Tzaddikim and a lot of normal Rashaim and normal people, you can work on transforming your emotions of your animal soul so that they are other-centered, but you're never going to completely root out that ego from the emotions of your animal soul. There'll always be a little bit left if you're a normal person like me. So we can't do that. And why? Hayinu mishum shehara chazak yoter b'midot mi b'chochma bin adat mipnei inikatan shem mehakedusha yoter k'hidroi l'odechen.
This is because the evil of klipa is stronger than the midot, than in Chabad, the intellectual faculties, since on that level of midot, they, the klipot, draw more vitality from holiness than they do on the level of Chabad, as is known to the students of the Kabbalah.
And if you want to read about the shattering of the vessels, there's a little note here. I won't go into it any more than we did, but at the level of the midot, klipa gets more energy from holiness and is fed, and it's a bigger phenomenon, a bigger balloon. On the level of Chabad, it's more refined, and klipa draws less energy, so we can transform our Chabad. So if any of you want to make a project of that, please be in touch. Let me know, and we can give you a program of study. My Chabad are still, trust me, the Chabad of Russia. So I haven't accomplished that, but exciting to think we can. Does that? For the people that have been with us for a long time, is that not like stunning to hear that your Chabad can be transformed? Or is it just me?
It'd be kind of tough with only 1 hour a week studying this, so we'd have to do it a lot more. Obviously.
Yeah, you have to make it a mission. I'm going to transform my Chabad. I'm going to just keep drilling it in and memorizing it, and but exciting to think that potential's there to me. Yeah, is it? No, it's not. It's not like oh my gosh.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it possible then when you're studying that elevation occurs? Or is it only if you are studying like constantly and you're able to really memorize everything and have it be your lens that it occurs?
So elevation is always occurring. Right now, all of us are elevating the animal soul and the vitality that goes into Chabad. So the elevation is always happening the moment you do it. Even if you don't recognize it or you're not in that vibe, you're not learning Torah to connect with God, it's still happening. Because obviously we have a subconscious, there's a lot going on that we're not aware of, but you can be aware of it. So the elevation is always happening. The question really is, Cindy, am I transforming the Chabad or am I just elevating it at that moment? So that the transformation, that's the piece that requires years and years of application and, almost self-hypnotizing myself to have the perspective of oneness rather than the perspective of duality. But elevation is happening every time, for sure. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So that was reason one.
Aren't we still trying to elevate ourselves from Rasha to Beinoni? We're not even at the step of going from Beinoni to a tzaddik.
Yeah, so that's not the point of the book. The point of this book is not to teach you how to transform your Chabad to be the Chabad of a tzaddik. That's why I assume he waited till 37 to let us know, by the way, this thing you're trying to do in your emotions, you can actually do it in your intellect, right? But that's not the point. The point of this book is to mature my emotions, even if I can't transform them, and guide them through the mind controlling the heart and through meditation. So this is answer one, which is, okay, the reason why you could say Torah is also equal to the other mitzvot combined, including tzedakah, is because A, it impacts the garments that are closer to your soul, thought and speech, as opposed to action, and B, because it can actually transform your aspect of Chabad. So you can unify your Chabad with the Ein Sof in a way that nothing else can. But now we're going to get to, as he says, a far more important, more superior aspect of why it is you could say that Torah study is equal to the other mitzvahs combined, which doesn't have to do with elevating the world at all. Because still, from the perspective of Adira B'Tachtonim and the focus of these 3 chapters of elevating the world, tzedakah you can't compare Torah study to tzedakah. Even these arguments he's given, tzedakah still does more of that. Zot ve'od acheret v'hi ha'ola al kulana b'malat esek Talmud Torah al kol hamitzvot.
Aside from this, there is another far more important aspect to the superiority of Torah study over all other mitzvot.
All right, so let's go into this inside. Where does it come from? Al pi sheniskar la'el b'shem atikunim de ramach pikudin hen ramach evarin de malka.
Based on the statement quoted above, chapter 23 from Tikkun Zohar, that the 248 positive commandments are the 248 limbs of the king, God.
So we learned that these commandments we have, these connecting points, these mitzvot, are not just random behaviors we're supposed to do. They actually represent kabbalistically a structure in our soul and a structure in the light of the Ein Sof. The light of the Ein Sof has what's called organs. It's a living being, and it has 613 total components, 248 positive commandments, which are like the organs of a body. And the light comes with that structure already embedded in it. That was God's ratzon. That was the keter, the level of keter of God's thought, so to speak. Before God even spoke the world into being, God thought, this is the structure. I'm going to give this Torah. It's going to have these 248 ways of behaving that just I want, right? No reason given. And so if we want to unify ourselves and have a connection with an infinite being, now I'm looking at the effect on my soul of Torah study, which is to unify me and my 248 spiritual organs with the 248 organs, so to speak, in the Or Ein Sof. And it's only Torah study that can cause me to unite. Yes, when I give charity, I'm fulfilling the purpose why God created me. I'm elevating the world. But for the purpose of me being connected to an infinite being, which should be impossible, now nothing replaces Torah study. Because now my Chabad becomes united with the Chabad of the Ein Sof, and these 248 soul organs, so to speak, that I have are united with the 248 soul organs within the Or Ein Sof. You wouldn't call them soul organs, of course, but components of the divine light. וכמו באדם התחתון דרך משל אין ערך ודמיון כלל בין החיות שברמ"ח איבריו לגבי החיות שבמוחין שהוא השכל המתחלק לגימל בחינות חוכמה בינה דעת.
Just as, for example, in the case of the human being, the vitality of his 248 organs bears no comparison or similarity to the vitality in his brain, the intellect, which is divided into 3 faculties, Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat.
Right, so I do my, if I ask which is more alive, my pinky or my brain, which is more alive? What's the answer? No, I mean, they're both alive, right?
They're both the same.
They're both alive. It's you're either alive or you're dead, right? So my pinky and my brain are both equally alive, right? Which is more unified and bound up with my soul in terms of how the soul flows into the body and how it's revealed? My brain or my pinky, right? There's a difference. Right. So me and my intellect, it reveals itself. It's manifest in my brain. And my brain is unified with the Chabad of my soul in a way that my pinky isn't, unless maybe you're a drummer and you're really into it and you get that connection, because there's ways of doing that. But normally, right, your brain, that's why your soul is unified and is manifest in a totally different way than your pinky. And we can also see that, of course, because if God forbid a situation where I might lose my pinky or my brain, there's no choice, right? I choose my brain over my pinky, even though they're both alive, right? Both, you can't say one's more alive than the other. So that's an obvious metaphor. Now take that and use that to try and understand the difference between Torah study and any other mitzvah. Because with Torah study, my Chabad is being united with the Chabad of the Ein Sof. And so of all these organs that we talk about that come down, that one has so much vitality and so much of the Or Ein Sof manifest, just like my brain has more vitality manifest and united with it than my pinky does. So in terms of uniting me with the Ein Sof and uniting me with all of those organs, which the energy comes through the brain, Torah study gathers it all and it unites me and my soul in a way that no other mitzvah can. So basically, it's a question of which is the advantage of Torah study and what's the advantage of a mitzvah. From the perspective of elevating the world, tzedakah is it and nothing compares. From the perspective of now connecting my soul with God, now Torah study is it and nothing else compares. So that's why we say each of them equals the other mitzvahs combined. It depends on which quality we're talking about. Following so far? How are we doing? Yeah, let's go a little more, and then we'll finish with yes,
How
Norrine.
can we say one is better than the other then? I mean, obviously they're working from two different perspectives, but why is one better than the other? Why is it better to elevate the world than it is to unite with God?
It's kind of how our tradition speaks, right? So we don't like saying these two things, they're on par. And, you have to do both. So let's consider them, they're equal. Like it likes to say, this is equal to everything else combined. The same way, they talk about the men of the great Sanhedrin. They say, if this in Pirkei Avot, right? If this sage were on one side and every other sage were on the other side, he'd outweigh them all. And then you take another sage and switch them and say, and if this sage was on one side and all the other sages on the other side, he'd outweigh them all. Well, mathematically, that doesn't work, right? But it's a way of thinking where maybe because you want to totally commit to each point, right? That's how the Torah expresses it. But ultimately, it's about when it comes to elevating the world, which is the purpose of existence. Now, tzedakah and mitzvah, that's like everything else. It's more important than anything. When it comes to connecting my soul with God, which is something my soul wants to do, it's the best advantage for me. Now, Torah study is worth all the others combined. So maybe it's stylistic, or maybe there's more to it. Does that go down? Is that okay for you, Norrine? Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a contradiction. Like the Torah is well aware, you can't, if you got a 20-pound weight and then 10 1-pound weights, it outweighs them. You can't now switch them, and there's no way that any one of these 1-pound weights will outweigh the 20 plus the 9. So, the sages were well aware that they were creating a paradox here.
So are they saying that it's less valuable to connect with God than it is to elevate the world, that elevating the world is better, more important?
I think they're saying it depends on what's happening right now. So if the next thing I have to do is do a mitzvah or give tzedakah, now that should outweigh everything else combined. But if there's no mitzvah I have to do right now I'm learning Torah, and now that outweighs everything else combined. So when I'm doing something, I want to do it as if that is the most important thing in the world, because by some perspective, but it has an advantage where it is, right? So really, it's like the two pieces of paper in your pocket, right? From mosher, right? One is I'm dust and ashes. The other is the world's created for me. Well, which is right? Okay, when I'm having to stay back from a situation, it's true. I'm dust and ashes. I should be surrendered to divine providence. If I have something that I have to fix in the world, now the world's created for me, and I can't step back, right? The whole world might be depending on this next mitzvah. So which is true? Depends which situation I'm in, right? Pull this paper out for when I have to, sit back and let someone else, be the leader, and have this paper for when the world's calling on me to find the resources to help with something. So I think it's the same thing here, right? Right now we're learning Torah. So right now Torah study is equal to all the mitzvahs combined, but when we're done and we go to the world and there's some mitzvah that comes across our plate, now, giving tzedakah and elevating the world becomes the whole point of reality.
So it isn't a matter of choosing.
No, I mean, the Torah doesn't choose either. The Torah asserts both are true. All right, let's stop here. We're at page 519, just at the bottom chunk of Chmo Ba'adam. And so Sharon, I'm going to give you a quick run through with all of us of our system of meditation that we've been learning. This is called the long short path. And we're meant to use the system on a daily basis to create a intellectual focus that will generate emotions, because the point of meditation in Judaism and Kabbalah is not to achieve a transcendental state of mind that is permanent, like Eastern systems of meditation that believe in complete transcendence as a goal, to simplify it. But in Judaism, the point is to generate emotions that are mature and other-centered. And I do that not by clearing the mind and keeping it empty, but I do it by clearing the mind and introducing a other-centered divine concept. And by allowing the details of that concept to fill my mind rather than empty my mind, I now generate emotions that will help elevate the world around me. So that is a very different pathway than Eastern meditations we may have studied. So we're going to start with the breath. So if you find yourself in a comfortable position, and if you're watching in the future, please join us. And although we may be in a habit of breathing in a shallow way, I want you to invite your breath to deepen right now. You look like long, flowing, smooth breathing in and out. Try and breathe through your nose if you can. And we're going to further allow our breath to open up into 4 stages. If you'd like to see the expanded version of this system of meditation, it's available on my teacher Laibl Wolf's website. He has a full, something like a 6-week program to learn the system, but we'll do it very quickly here. We're going to allow the breath to open up into 4 stages. So 4 counts with me, breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Let yourself stay inflated, 3, 4. And now breathe out on the count of 2, 3, 4, and stay deflated, 2, 3. This is 4 stages, breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Keep the air in, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4. Let the air stay out, 2, 3. Keep that cycle at your own pace. If you can, let's have this breathing be abdominal breathing, so that when you breathe in, your belly is swelling out like a happy baby. And when you breathe out, it should pull back up. Should be a very, very nice feeling there in your solar plexus and your abdomen. And our technique involves opening up a wisdom gateway. Again, this is elaborated much more in detail with my teacher Laibl's tools available online. But in short, our wisdom gateway is the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. So even in a hectic day, when I breathe in, there's a little moment, there's a little gap between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. We've expanded it here so we can stay there for 4 counts, but it's there every time you breathe. That's your wisdom gateway. It's available in any situation. I want you to open up that wisdom gateway, as it were. And perhaps the most spiritual part of the technique is I want you to stay in that wisdom gateway even as you go through the rest of the other counts of the breathing. So we can remain in that wisdom gateway, keeping it accessible as we go through the whole cycle of breathing. And once you have that gateway open, whether you're seeing it in your mind's eye or in more abstract form, whatever it may be. We're going to introduce, and this is where Kabbalistic meditation differs from meditation in the East. We're going to introduce a divine concept and allow the details of that divine concept to fill the gateway, fill my mind in every detail. Let's use the image we started with of a beautiful lamp. The wick of that lamp is your physical being and your animal soul. The light, and see the light in your mind's eye, beautiful white light clinging to the wick, that is God's presence in your life and in your world and here at Temple. And the beautiful golden olive oil in the lamp, that is the physical mitzvahs we've done. Everything we've done over the past week. And let your wisdom gateway keep that image. It can be bright and moving and full of color and heat. And rest assured, the longer we stay focused on this divine concept, on this meditative concept from the Zohar, that our soul is a lamp, the more we generate mature divine soul and other centered emotions that will be available to us throughout the day. And we can slowly transform the identity, the emotional body of our animal soul. If this is a practice you're doing on your own, not in real time in class, feel free to stay here for whatever is appropriate, 5, 10, 20 minutes. If you're with us in class, let's open our eyes, wiggle our fingers and toes. Come back to this here and now, time and space. So beautiful. Thanks for joining us. I hope that that light we just kindled in our Wisdom Gateway adds some light to the Hanukkah candles as we approach Hanukkah tonight. It's a beautiful time to learn Hasidus. This is a really spiritual holiday. So as each one of those nights grows in light, we should also grow ourselves in terms of how we elevate the world around us and light up our own souls with this wisdom. Yeah, signing off from Facebook here. So thanks for joining us if you're on Facebook, and we'll see you next time in class.